I had driven past the building dozens of times. 7 years of marriage, and I had never walked through the front door. That is not unusual, I told myself on the drive over. Plenty of spouses have never visited their partner's office. It is not a measurement of anything. I told myself that the whole way there. The lobby was the kind that corporate buildings have, glass and neutral colors and a front desk with a branded panel behind it. I walked in holding a manila folder with Daniel's doctor's note, his employee ID number, and a letter from his physician outlining the medical leave requirement. I had organized it carefully that morning. I am someone who organizes things carefully when I am nervous and need to feel useful. The receptionist was a young woman with her hair pulled back, and she looked up when I approached and smiled the professional smile of someone who greets strangers for a living. I told her I was there on behalf of my husband. I gave his full name. I said he was in logistics management and that I needed to speak with someone in HR about a medical leave request. She typed. She looked at her screen. She typed again. Then she said she didn't have a record of anyone by that name. I gave her his employee ID number. I told her the department. I told her the title he had mentioned to me as recently as 3 weeks ago, Senior Logistics Coordinator. And I watched her face do something careful and small that faces do when a person knows more than they are going to say. She made a phone call. She turned slightly away from me while she made it and spoke in a voice too low to hear. When she turned back, she told me someone from HR would be right down and asked me to please take a seat. I sat in a chair near the window with my folder on my lap. My name is Renee. I am 37 years old, and I work from home as a freelance grant writer, which means I spend my days making careful arguments for why institutions should trust someone with their resources. I am good at reading the shape of a proposal. I am good at identifying what is missing from one. I had married Daniel when I was 30. We had 2 children, a house in a suburb that required a 40-minute commute, a life that from any external vantage point looked like what people mean when they say things are fine. Daniel worked long hours. He traveled occasionally. He had a work phone that I had never had a reason to look at because I had never had a reason to look at it. He had been sick for 5 days when I drove to his office. A fever, deep fatigue, the kind of sick that requires a doctor's note and 2 weeks away from work. He had asked me to call HR directly. The number on his work badge went to a voicemail that had never been set up. I had tried it 3 times over 2 days before deciding to go in person. The HR representative who came down to the lobby was a woman in her mid-40s named Sandra. She was polite, and her expression was professionally composed in the way that expressions are when someone has been trained to manage uncomfortable conversations. She confirmed that Daniel did work there. The pause before that confirmation was not long, but it was there. She took my folder. She said someone would follow up with him directly about the leave paperwork and that I should expect a call within 2 business days. She thanked me for coming in. I was walking back through the lobby toward the exit when I passed a woman coming in from the parking structure. She was about my age, professionally dressed, carrying a tote bag with a company logo on it. She glanced at me the way people do in lobbies. Brief, incidental. And then she looked at me again. It was the second look that I have thought about many times since. It was not curiosity. It was not sympathy. It was the look of someone who recognizes a context they were not expecting to encounter and who makes a rapid decision to look away. She looked away. I kept walking. I drove home. I did not tell Daniel about any of it. He was in bed with a fever, and I brought him soup, and I sat with the feeling of that lobby for several days without saying a word about it. I am someone who needs to understand something before I speak about it. I was not ready to understand it yet. But I began noticing things. There was a second phone, a personal cell that I had always assumed was a work-issued backup. I noticed that he kept it face down when he was home, which I had attributed to habit, and that he took it into the bathroom in the mornings, which I had not thought about until I began thinking about it. There were calendar blocks on the shared family calendar labeled with initials, TR, 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 appearing on Tuesday evenings over the past several months. He had told me those evenings were a standing team meeting. There was a receipt. I found it in the pocket of his jacket when I was doing laundry, a restaurant 40 minutes from our house, dinner for two on a Tuesday evening in November when he had told me the team meeting ran late and he had eaten at the office. I did not react. I put the receipt in the pocket of my own cardigan, and I finished the laundry, and I started writing things down. 3 days after I found the receipt, our landline rang. Landlines are nearly ceremonial at this point, and we receive almost nothing on it but insurance offers. So I answered with the mild disinterest I reserve for numbers I don't recognize. The man on the other end asked for Daniel by his first name and introduced himself as Roy, a colleague. He said he was calling to check in, that he had heard Daniel was under the weather. I said yes, Daniel had been sick but was recovering. Roy said he was glad to hear it, and then he said he hadn't realized Daniel was married. There was a silence. Roy filled it immediately, saying something like, "Of course I knew that, I just meant," and then he moved on quickly and thanked me and ended the call. But he had said it. He had said it once in the unguarded way that people say things that are true before they remember they shouldn't. I called a family law attorney the next morning. Her name was Claire, and I told her I was not certain of anything yet, but that I had a feeling I was building a case I hadn't meant to build. She told me to document everything I observed without confrontation, and to access any jointly held financial records I had the right to see. I sat down that afternoon with our bank statements. The joint savings account that we kept as an emergency fund, the one I had last looked at 14 months ago when I was filing our taxes, had been drawn down by nearly 60%. The withdrawals were small, a few $100s at irregular intervals, the kind of amounts that read as normal expenses if you're not looking at the pattern, and that read as a systematic transfer if you are. I looked at the pattern for a long time. I accessed our shared cloud storage account that evening. We had used it for years: family photos, shared documents, the children's school records. I was looking for a specific document, a copy of the original mortgage agreement that I needed for a reference. I found a folder I had not created and had never seen. I will not describe what was in it in detail. It was not explicit, but it was 14 months of photographs and messages that were unmistakable in their context, and the folder had been sitting in a storage account that I had access to for 6 years, and I had never once thought to look. I closed the laptop, I sat in the kitchen for a while, then I opened it again, because I am someone who finishes what she starts. I had been managing our household finances for the entirety of our marriage: mortgage, utilities, children's accounts, insurance, joint investments. I had records going back to the year we bought the house. As a grant writer, documentation is not a task for me. It is a mode of thinking. I began building a file the way I would build a funding proposal, organized by category, sourced and timestamped, every withdrawal, every receipt, every calendar entry. My attorney reviewed it and told me that Daniel had opened a separate personal account and had been redirecting a consistent portion of his income into it for 22 months. She explained that in our state, financial diversion of marital income during a marriage, when documented, is classified as dissipation of marital assets, and that it is treated as a significant factor in equitable distribution proceedings. She said the documentation I had was thorough. I told her I had built it in 4 days and that I could make it more thorough. I told Daniel I knew on a Sunday evening. The children were in bed, he was sitting at the kitchen table, and I sat down across from him and I told him what I had found, and I watched his face move through several things in rapid succession before settling into a stillness that I recognized as the look of a person deciding how much to admit. He did not deny it. He said he had been planning to tell me. He used the word planning. I understood that there was a timeline attached to that word, and that the timeline had been constructed with a specific destination in mind, and that the destination was not one that had taken my financial position into account. I asked him about the savings account. He said the withdrawals had been for practical reasons. He used the word practical. I wrote it down. The formal asset disclosure meeting was held in Claire's conference room 6 weeks later. Neutral colors, a long table, the particular quiet of a room where financial documents are about to determine the shape of someone's future. Daniel was there with his attorney, a careful and confident man who had clearly been told that the asset picture was straightforward. Daniel's attorney presented the financial summary. It did not include the separate account. It did not reference the 22 months of diverted income. It was a clean and organized document that told a partial story with complete confidence. Claire placed our documentation on the table. Bank records, account statements, the full 18 months of transfers, each one sourced to a specific date and amount. The separate account opened 22 months prior with a current balance that reflected nearly 2 years of consistent deposits. Daniel's attorney requested a recess. When they came back, the tone of the room had changed in the specific way that rooms change when the people in them have had to recalibrate what they thought they knew. The diverted funds were classified as dissipated marital assets. They were factored into the equitable distribution calculation in their entirety. The outcome was significantly different from what Daniel's original filing had been designed to produce. I retained the family home. I received a settlement that gave me the financial footing to rebuild without starting from nothing. Primary custody was established with a schedule that put the children's stability first. I never reached out to the woman from the hallway. I learned her name eventually through the ordinary process of things becoming clear that were once unclear. I thought about it once and then decided against it. Her story was her own. I had enough of mine. I expanded my grant writing practice in the months that followed. I took on 2 anchor clients I had previously turned down because the work would have been too demanding around Daniel's schedule. I hired a part-time assistant in the fall. The work is the best it has been in 10 years, and I have not once described it as something I keep manageable. I drove past his office building a few months after everything was finalized. I don't know why, it was not on my route. I had made a small detour without fully deciding to. I looked at the glass front and the logo and the lobby I had sat in with a folder on my lap, not understanding what I had walked into. I drove home. I had dinner with my children, I wrote up a proposal for a client that was due the following morning, and I sent it at 11:30, and it was the best proposal I had submitted all year. I didn't need to understand the building. I had understood enough. If you have ever walked into a situation looking for one thing and come out knowing something you weren't ready for and then found a way through it anyway, I'd like to hear how you did it. And if this story meant something to you, subscribe. There are more ahead.